Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I know there's a lot of traffic in here in the morning, so I'm sure other people will trickle in. Please make sure you grab the training booklet and signed in, especially if you are a COC-funded agency or a member of the Way Home, because we do verify this for COC NOFA competitions as well as letters of support and any type of other funding requests through the coalition. We verify attendance at trainings as well as participation in the point in time. So please make sure you sign in and grab a shirt from the back. So good morning, my name is Anna Roush. I am with the Coalition for the Homeless, and I oversee the point in time, the homeless count. This is my third year overseeing the count. I took over in 2016 when we switched to technology. So thank you for coming this morning. Quick agenda. You can follow along in your book. I did make a couple of changes to the slides, so if I remember, I'll point them out so you can cross them out in your book. We're going to do some overview of the count, talk a little bit about some numbers from the 2018 count, talk about the app, the maps, and everything that you're going to need to know for the homeless count. So let me see a quick show of hands for those of you that this is your first time participating in the count. Wow. That's great. That's fantastic. Well, thank you. We're excited for new faces, and welcome to those of you that have done it many times like I have. So in 2018, we had our count on January 22nd, and there were 4,143 people experiencing homelessness in Harris, Fort Bend, and Montgomery counties. So our COC encompasses all of Harris, all of Fort Bend, and all of Montgomery counties. That's about 3,700 square miles. So it is a huge task for us to conduct this count, which is why we have to do it over a 3-day period. 39% of the people were in what we call a place not meant for human habitation, meaning they were unsheltered on the streets, and then 61% were in emergency shelters. The 2018 PIP represents a 12% increase compared to 2017. Up until 2018, we had shown a steady decline, but due to at 51% since 2011. So great things have happened in Houston since 2011. And our count back then was about 8,500. Let's see. We are Skyping to Montgomery and Fort Bend, and she can't hear me. Can you make sure the audio
It just said that it went in and out, so.
Okay. Conchetta is manning the audio, so she will be answering questions and doing all the technology for me, so thank you. Okay, so 1 in 4 were experiencing chronically homeless, so I'll talk a little bit about that later. It's important for you to know what the difference is between chronic homeless and literal homelessness. We didn't have any unsheltered chronic homeless families, but we did have 9 in shelter. 1 and 2 had mental health problems, which is not surprising for those of you that are in homeless services. 1 and 7 was a veteran. We do remain at steady state levels for veteran homelessness. We ended veteran homelessness in June of 2015. So that means that we are at functional 0. So if any veteran presents to our system for housing, we have a housing option for them. So veterans do not stay on our wait list long. For those of you that are just coming in, make sure you sign in, grab a booklet, and then grab a shirt from the back. You can wait to the end, or you can grab one now. It's up to you. And feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have questions also. So the chronic homeless PIP. So these are the numbers for chronic homelessness for unsheltered, which is the blue, and sheltered. So you can see that there was a decline of unsheltered chronic homelessness up until last year, and then there was an increase in sheltered homelessness for chronics. And we have worked really hard with our shelter partners to have beds set aside for those chronically homeless individuals that we've been trying to house. We're trying to end chronic homelessness right now, so we try to get folks into shelter while they're waiting on a housing placement. So that is why you'll see the decline in our numbers, because we've housed people, and then the slight increase in shelters because we're trying to get them off the streets and in shelter while they're waiting for their housing placement. But you will see the slight uptick in unsheltered homelessness for between 2017 and 2018. So I get this question a lot. Why do we count? Well, first of all, HUD says we have to, and that it has to happen sometime in January, around the third week of January. Typically, we count the week after Martin Luther King, but the way the Mondays fell this year, we're going to count during the week of Martin Luther King. We use the numbers for a lot of reasons. Obviously we have to report on our progress, so we put in all of these numbers into HUD. HUD has several online databases that we have to enter numbers into. They in turn pull those numbers and they prepare that annual homeless assessment report to Congress. So that is what the entire United States is doing as far as homelessness goes. So every city has to turn in those numbers, and that gives a snapshot of what's going on all across the country. So that is reason number one. And then reason number two, which is also important, is that the count determines what the amount of funding that is coming into our COC. So we get about $33 million in homeless services dollars in our COC directly from HUD. So that's quite a bit of money, and HUD wants to know what we're doing with that money, if we're improving or if we're not improving, and why, for both of them. The homeless count, we also use it to determine the amount of local, so state, county, and city funds that are coming directly into our COC. The count helps with that. The count helps us determine services and if some subpopulations are growing. So if we have youth homeless, usually our youth numbers are not very high. We're not one of those cities that has a large youth homeless number. But if something happens and all of a sudden we do, then we know we need to target services towards that population. So we use the homeless count for that. The homeless count, lastly, helps us determine hotspots, what we call hotspots, which are dense concentration of homeless people throughout the COC. And that helps us to send direct outreach teams and we do use coordinated access in our homeless count. We're one of the few cities in the nation that does this. This means that we have trained coordinated access assessors on some of the teams going to hotspot areas that can conduct housing assessments on the spot. So what you see on the screen is the actual definition of what coordinated access is by HUD. I'm not going to read it to you, but coordinated access is really a process. It's a path into housing. It's called different things all over the country. Mostly it's referred to as coordinated entry. It's really the size of the geographic region, I think, that determines what it's called. I know that some communities that are very, very small and they have one location for everyone to go to can call it centralized access. Houston is large, or RCOC is large, so we've called it coordinated access from the beginning. So coordinated access, again, is one single path into housing, and it's only for people that are homeless. It's not homeless prevention. It's not people that are precariously housed. It's an assessment process for people that are homeless. You can just click through all three. Thank you. So coordinated access in Houston today, this is a quick overview of what it looks like. We have 13 assessment hubs, we call them. They're located in various shelters, drop-in centers, and some ministries across our COC. We have all of our outreach teams dedicated to coordinated access. That means that they can assess and house people directly from the field. Folks don't have to come into the office. We have a call-in option through the City of Houston. This call-in line is only for providers to call with an individual. We don't give the number out to clients to call. And that is because we want accountability on the end, on the side of the provider, to ensure you're calling in with this person and that is telling us that this individual is in fact homeless and meets the criteria for one of the housing options that we have. All of the assessments and everything that we use for coordinated access is in our HMIS. So that is the Homeless Management Information System. It's the client level, the database that we use online to track client level information. All of that happens in HMIS, so the client doesn't have to tell their story multiple times. It's all in one place and they only have to tell their story once. The match to permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, income, and SOAR, which is the disability process, all of that happens in HMIS. The consent is electronic, so people can sign directly on tablets if you have that, or you can sign, they can sign using a mouse directly on the computer screen, so that saves it in HMIS, their signature, in case we ever need to refer back to it. All of our vulnerability tools that we've used, we have one now that was recently revised in November. All of that is done in HMIS, the matching, the referral process, everything. We have a little over 20 navigators, system navigators that take clients from the point of referral all the way to moving into a unit. And not all programs have navigators, some do. We have certain programs that we assign navigators to. And then finally, the coordinated access process is part of our NOFA scoring. That means that we use a variety of things to gauge how our homeless service partners, those that get a part of that, a piece of that $33 million, we do score them. We score their application, and one of the things that we score on is a participation in coordinated access. So if someone is allowing a client to enroll, or an agency is allowing a client to enroll in one of their programs without having gone through coordinated access, they will get dinged. All right, so the good stuff. So where and when and how are we counting? So the when, January 22nd through the 24th. That is the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, directly after the week of Martin Luther King. So please remember that Monday is a holiday for most people, so you will be going Tuesday directly to your first staging location. You'll get an email confirmation from me to remind you that you have to show up there at 6:30 in the morning to greet your team members and go along. The first day we're going to cover, excuse me, here's my trusty map. We're going to cover the 610 loop. The second day we're going to cover east of 45 and 288, East Montgomery County. The third day we'll cover west of 45 and 288, West Montgomery County, and all of Fort Bend. So this is what, if you want to come take a look at this map later. Sorry. So you can see the 610 loop directly in the middle here. And then the way that we've divided out the huge geographic region that we have. The areas that are scratched off, that are marked off, those are very extreme forested and rural areas, such as the Sam Houston Forest up in Montgomery County. So those are areas that we don't have to cover because really people aren't there. And those that encampments are out in those rural areas, typically the providers that are in those counties know where they're located, and we can send teams out to those areas. But this is kind of what it looks like all over the COC. We have a camera, so I'm trying to record this in case we need it for something. The official night of the count, even though we do count over a three-day period, we still have to have an official night of the count for HUD purposes, and that official night of the count is the 21st, which is Martin Luther King night. For the sheltered count, we pull that information directly from HMIS. So all of the shelter providers that use HMIS will pull that directly from HMIS, and for the DV providers, they fill out forms and report that information to us. But the rest of when we do the unsheltered count, we refer back to the night of the 21st. So that will be when you're doing your survey, and I'll remind you of this when we're practicing, you're gonna ask the individual, where did you spend Monday night? Even if you're on Thursday, you're still gonna ask them, where did you spend Monday night? So it's really important to remember that. So you're gonna receive the designate and assign a map area. This is what a map area is gonna look like. You're gonna get a laminated key map assignment, and it might have sectioned off depending. This is one for downtown Houston area. So it's very concentrated in specific locations, so we have to divide it out because there's a lot of homeless people in the core of the city. But as we get further and further out, your team might get an entire map, or entire front, or entire back, or both front and back. We understand that some of these maps might be outdated. We got these maps from the Key Map store. The Key Map does not update every year. And these maps were very, very expensive, and the Key Map store was very generous in the price that they gave to us to get these maps, and they laminated them for us. Really, these maps are to determine the area that you need to count in, the borders. Yes, we understand that there's construction and new development within those borders, so there's gonna be a few slight differences in these maps. We understand that. Every year I get complaints from people that these maps aren't accurate. You don't have to follow the streets to the detail within these maps. You can use your phone to do that. That'll help you because your phones will probably have a better detail for those specific locations. So just be patient. The maps are really for you to know where you need to count, the borders that you need to count within. You're gonna drive around the map areas that you're assigned, and you're gonna park, and you're gonna go out, and you're gonna use your phone, and you're gonna interview people that might be experiencing homelessness. So to count teams, even though we have titles. They're not official. We refer to them as drivers, navigators, surveyors, and spotter surveyors. We usually have about 4 people to a team, sometimes 5, depending on the staging location. We will not put less than 3 people on a team. We don't like to put just 3 people on a team because if you have 4, then you can get done with your area faster. This is why it's very, very, very important that if you sign up to do the count, that you show up to your staging location, because we don't want to shortchange that staging location. What that means is that if they don't get all of the volunteers that show up, then some of the teams will be given 2 maps. And as you're going further out in the counties, that can sometimes be a lot of driving to cover. So please be aware, and if you cannot go, to send someone in your place. At this point, the registration is going to close after this training because I have to finalize the team assignments. So please, if you cannot participate, I need to know if you're a COC funded or Way Home HMIS agency, you have to have participants. So my email is at the end of this booklet, so please let me know if you are not able to join us. Your cell phone is what you're going to be using, like I mentioned. You can check in with your staging captain. There's going to be coalition staff at your staging location that you signed up for. That's where you're going to report on the morning of the count at 6:30. So the driver, obviously, anybody on the team can volunteer to drive if that is what you feel most comfortable with. If you don't want to do any surveys, you can choose to drive. You have to have insurance. When you signed up, you indicated if you want to drive or not. I'm not assigning drivers. We asked that question, but really I'm not assigning drivers. I'm going to let the teams decide who wants to drive that morning when you show up at your staging area. The navigator should be someone that's very good with directions, that can guide the driver using the map area that you're assigned and not get lost. Hopefully that won't happen. Go ahead. The surveyor is someone who can obviously do the surveys, but it doesn't have to be 1 surveyor per team. All 4 of you can be the surveyor. That's great. The more people that can participate, the faster we'll finish. So it's totally okay if everybody on the team wants to be a surveyor. But if only 1 or 2 people feel comfortable, that's okay also. There just has to be at least 1 person on that team that's going to conduct the interviews. The spotter surveyor, again, that's just someone who can help find areas. You can sometimes see encampments, just be on the lookout. And then some of the teams that are going to heavily concentrated areas, like I mentioned, will have a coordinated access assessor on their team. And those individuals will conduct coordinated access assessments for anybody that's chronically homeless, veteran, youth, or families. So that's what's going to be happening out in the field for those that are trained coordinated access assessors. Okay, so we're just a quick overview on this. We're going to practice in a little bit, so you don't have to do it right this second. But you're going to need a charged phone or device that you're going to download the Counting Us app from either the Google Play or the App Store. You're going to register an account and log in. If you participated last year, you can use your same login and email address and password that you used. If you forgot it, you can recover it on the app. Make sure you check your junk mail, because it's gone to some people's junk mail, the reset password email. You're going to tap Getting Started. You're going to enter the project key to our region. It's Houston 19. Scratch that out in your books, please. It's Houston 19. We forgot to update the booklet before it went to print. So I apologize for that. It should be Houston 19 in your book. You're going to select HUD-Kit interview and then start practice on the survey. Very, very, very important. Please enable location services on your phone. We have to have we capture longitude and latitude for every survey that's conducted. It's not to try to, go back and try to get anybody later. We use it to see concentrations, densities for our entire COC, all 3,700 square miles. We also use it to try to find individuals that we've targeted for housing. So if you interviewed John Doe and he's, at a specific area and we've been trying to find him to house him, then we can send the navigator or outreach person out to find him. So that's another way that we use the longitude and latitude. But if you don't enable that on your phone, then we won't be able to see where the survey, we'll still get the survey, we just won't be able to see where it was done. Again, we're going to practice this later, but the Counting Us app looks like this is the exact process that I just described to you, and Houston 19 is on the 1, 2, 3, 4 step. So we're gonna do that in just a few minutes. The Counting Us can also be done on the internet. So there are some locations where they're going to be doing assessments on site, or surveys on site. So they'll just go directly to their computer and type in the Counting Us, and it's the exact same thing as doing it on their phone. Okay, so this is very, very, very important. I want everyone to really listen to this part. Last year, the whole point of us doing the surveys electronically is so that we can get more information. Before 2016, for those of you that were around at that time, we used to get, the count was one night, it was that night, we would get in our vehicles, drive around, and literally, if you saw someone, you'd put tally marks on your piece of paper, an intersection, and maybe a zip code. And every volunteer would do that, and then we would have to transcribe that information later. It was a very cumbersome process. That was just numbers. In order to get a sample of the entire geographic area as far as demographics and anything else goes, we had to choose a small sample size of actual interviews done at like the Beacon, for example. So then what we would do from that is, let's say, for example, in a simplistic way, if 10% of the people interviewed said that they were veterans, then we had to apply that 10% across the entire number of people that were counted, just to try to get a quick summary of how many veterans we think there are. If we do that now, then it's not, we want to eliminate having to extrapolate as much as possible. So for that, we need as many surveys. Last year, we did not have a lot of surveys. If you see the orange are actual interviews that were conducted, and the blue were observations. We don't want observations. Observations are what we did back in 2015. This is very, very bad. So unless it's absolutely necessary, unless it's dangerous, we do not want you to do observations. We want you to actually interview people. If you can't get to that person because it's a dangerous location, you have to cross a freeway, that's understandable. Go ahead and do a summary, an observation. If the person refuses to talk to you, try someone else on your team. And if the person still refuses to talk to you, then do an observation. If you don't feel comfortable talking to someone, ask somebody else on your team to do it. And if you still can't do it, then call your staging area captain and see if we can send somebody else out there to help you. That's how serious we are about getting as many interviews as possible. So I can't stress enough how important it is to interview and not observe. Anybody have questions about that? Okay. All right, so some quick definitions of homelessness. Sheltered homeless obviously is people that are in shelter, emergency shelter, transitional housing. Unsheltered homeless are anybody that's living outside or in a place not meant for human habitation. Park benches, under a bridge, in an encampment, all of those things. Chronic homelessness, those are people that have been outside for a long, long time and have a disabling condition, something that prevents them from working and where they need housing in order to stabilize. And again, we need this information because we're trying to end chronic homelessness, and it's important for you to kind of review this and familiarize yourself with it, because if you have a coordinated access assessor on your team, then and when you're doing the interview and you see that the person has been outside for a long time and has been in and out of shelter for a long time and has a disability, you can go to your team member and say, hey, I think this person might be chronically homeless. Can you look them up in HMIS? And then the coordinated access assessor will take it from there. We already showed you what the sample map looks like. Okay, so how do I know if they're homeless? Appearance, wearing many layers of clothing. Those of you that are service providers, especially those that work with chronically homeless, you are very familiar with this. Poor physical condition, weathered skin, lots of belongings, sleeping or laying down on ground, benches, parks, railways, bridges, tents or tarps, blankets hanging from trees, cars packed with belongings. I feel comfortable enough tapping the window of someone in a vehicle sleeping to do an interview, but I'm not telling anybody to do that. Those of you that are outreach and are, navigators, if you feel comfortable, or even if you're a service provider and you feel comfortable doing that, go ahead, but I'm not, by any means suggesting to anyone that you have to do that. Just use your own judgment and work with your team members to see how to handle that situation. Please report to your staging area on time. You will get left behind, and then it'll be hard to find your team at that point, and you'll have to leave your vehicle somewhere which is not the staging location. Stay with your teams all the time, lock your doors. Do not go out by yourself. Don't walk away by yourself. Stay with your team. Don't go out into the middle of some wooded area by yourself. Safety is most important during the count. You can ask gas station attendant, business owners. There's going to be a lot of media presence that day, so the whole community is going to know that the homeless count's going on. You're going to be wearing these bright yellow neon shirts. So folks are going to know, the community is going to know, police officers are going to know. So you can go up and ask someone, if they know McDonald's, if they know of any homeless people in the area, and they'll direct you to where that might be. Report accurately. Use your best judgment. Check your time. We've never gone past 4 o'clock, and we don't want to. So finish by 4 p.m. On the flip side of that, don't go too fast. Because sometimes in the morning people get up and they go find a meal, and then they may come back in a couple of hours, and when you drive through in the morning you may not see them, but if you go back in a couple of hours you will. So if you try to go back to your staging area too soon, your captain is just going to send you back out. So maybe stop for coffee, you can stop for lunch around lunchtime and grab something to eat, and then go back out and scour your area again to make sure you didn't miss anyone. If you're worried about double counting, don't be, because the first question that we ask is, has anybody else interviewed you already? And if so, then the survey stops. So then you don't, unless somebody really is lying, which doesn't happen often. Go ahead. Okay, don't allow people to leave the vehicle alone. Don't take risks. Don't venture too far out. Don't venture outside your map boundaries, please. Make sure so that we can avoid duplication as much as possible, even though we do ask in the survey. Don't go outside your staging area, or your boundaries. Don't give money or rides or promise housing. I know that a lot of you are service providers. This isn't a time for case management. I know it's hard. This is information gathering only. We don't offer water. We don't offer blankets or socks or anything of that nature. We get asked that every year. I've done this a lot. I've gone out and outreach a lot, and I've never had anybody refuse to answer questions because I didn't give them a treat. So please don't promise anything, okay? Don't forget to bring back your maps. Please, we need those maps back because we do reuse them. Don't double count. Don't assume. So if you see blankets, but you don't see a person in those blankets, don't assume that there's a person there, because sleeping bags are abandoned on a daily basis. Tents are abandoned on a daily basis. So unless you actually talk to someone, or you see that person there and they won't talk to you, you can do an observation, but don't assume. Don't also assume that put a disability down if the person said no. As hard as that is, don't put that down, because we have to report what the person is telling us. How to engage. Be courteous, respectful. Remember that you're entering into their home. That is their home. So ask if you can go in, if you're in an encampment, to step into the area. Don't shine flashlights in people's faces. If you have like your phone's flashlight, shine it in your own face if it's dark, and introduce yourself. We have a little script there that you can follow if you've never done this before and you're a little uncomfortable doing it. You can follow this, or if you're with someone who's experienced, who's done it, you can observe them doing it a couple of times, and then do it yourself. You can skip through. These are just some pictures of previous years, a long time ago. So FAQs, what happens if I don't have cell reception when conducting a survey? You can save it as a draft and submit it once cell service resumes. So it's okay. How much data can you expect the app to use? 30 surveys uses less than streaming a single 4-minute song. So if you're worried about data. How much space will the app use on my personal device? It's less than 6 megabytes. In comparison, 300 emails is 100 megabytes. My friend is going to staging area 1, but I registered at staging area 2. Can I go to my friend's staging area? No, don't do that. Because of the reasons that I already mentioned, you're going to be short-changing the staging area that you're registered to. My team finished our map area. Can we count in another? No. Again, I've already mentioned this. We want to make sure you stay within your own area. So some helpful information, we are gonna have some street guides available at the staging areas. There's some copies, so you can take some with you to pass out if you'd like to give someone. There are some few shelter locations as well as coordinated access locations on the street guide. Unfortunately, we do not have shelter available. Last year, the city of Houston did have, some options for people to be picked up to take in a shelter, but I think only 10 people took us up on that offer. And we just don't have a lot of shelter capacity right now, so we're not doing that this year. The city's not gonna do that this year. My phone number is on there, the homeless outreach team's number for non-emergency, Harris County, Fort Bend, and Montgomery County. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we move on to practicing? Yes.
If we're conducting a interview and they mention that they are a veteran, how do we identify that for you to know?
The question is, if you're conducting an interview and someone says that they're a veteran, the surveys ask if they're a veteran. So if you have a coordinated access person on your team, they can assess them, but if not, we can pull that information from the survey. Because it's gonna ask if they're a veteran, and the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pull all the veterans and talk to the VA and make sure they're to see if they're on our binding list. Yes, but the veteran question is on the app. Yes.
I know a lot of shelters do intake where a lot of people that's not a part of the shelter live at that night. So how are you gonna count them?
The question is that there are shelters that conduct intake for people, so there may be a crowd around the shelter. Is that what you're saying? But people are not staying there?
Yeah, like the rescue, because I think this is wrong with the salvation, know how they stay on the floor at night. So
There's gonna be captured on the shelter count.
gotcha.
Yeah. So if they're sheltered, if they stayed at Star of Hope Monday night and then they leave and they're on the streets, there's a question on the survey that asks where they were. And if they stay in shelter, it stops the survey. And then we do have, we're gonna be conducting surveys at the Beacon on Thursday, so we can capture anybody that we might have missed. Yes, Errol?
So if my map boundary follows a freeway, who should count under that freeway?
Your map is going, good question. Your map is going to have a line on one or other side of the freeway. So right here, this team A is going to count under 59. I'm sorry, under 610. This team that's here is not, because the line ends at 610. Yours includes 610. So check your maps, and if the line is including the freeway, that means you count under the freeway. If your line stops at the freeway, that means you do not count under the freeway. Any other questions? Okay, can we go back to the counting us one? Has a little phone. There. Okay, so go ahead and take out your phones, and if you haven't already, go to the Apple or Google Play Store and download. You can try that QR code there and scan it and see if it works. If not, you can just go to one of those stores and download the app. It looks like what's on the screen. It says Counting Us. It's a blue circle with a white check mark and the word us on there. Once you have the app downloaded to your phone, you're going to open it and create a user ID and password. So we'll wait a few minutes, and coalition staff, if you're here, if you need help, raise your hand and we can send someone out to help you. So I'll wait a few minutes until everybody does that. For Ben and Montgomery County, if you're practicing with this at this point, you don't have to stay on anymore. X out of it.
The whole webinar?